Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. This is Chamber Chats, as in Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to recognize, as always, by acknowledging that I live and work in the traditional ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Esquimalt and the Songhees. It's our privilege and pleasure to live and work alongside them every single day. Chamber Chats are made possible by Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and by C-SPAN Victoria Shipyards. And we broadcast, as always, from the studio at Czech Television in Victoria. One of the things through this entire pandemic that has caused stress and worry to a lot of people is the fact that there are people who will not wear a mask. For whatever reason it might be, they feel that they don't have to, they don't believe the whole thing. And it's been very unsettling. So there's a bit of a legal side to that. But another side to that is, how do the people in the stores and workforce deal with the people who refuse to do that? There's been some confrontation. So we want to talk about that today with a couple of people. Charlotte Solomon, first of all, is a partner at the law firm of McConnon, Beyond, O'Connor and Peterson, and also a member of our policy committee at the Chamber. And Lisa Houle is here from WorkSafeBC. She's the manager of occupational health and safety consultation and education services. Thank you to both of you for being here today. And Lisa, I want to begin with you. WorkSafeBC is something, we know the name, but let's frame up a little bit about what your organization does and the major role that you've played in our management of this pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me here today. WorkSafeBC is the regulator, the occupational health and safety regulator for the province of British Columbia. And so what that means is our jurisdiction is places of employment and workers, and keeping workers safe. Our role in this pandemic has come from a number of different avenues, but for the most part, we have been working as best we can to support the Public Health Office in their mandates and orders and direction that they've been given the whole of the province. And in particular, we've been trying to help make sure that employers are clear on how best they can keep their work sites safe so they can stay open for business.
Okay, we're going to loop back on that. Charlotte, the question I have for you, first of all, is those who refuse to comply with the regulations that are put in place, what in reality is the difference between a guideline or a health regulation and a law? What's the difference there?
The health regulations, as it is, they are set out in a public health order that Minister Farnsworth has put forward, based on what he is told by his advisors, including Dr. Bonnie Henry. And there are repercussions if you do violate the Emergency Program Act and any of the orders under it. Violations are generally fines, but it is up to a law enforcement agency such as the police able to enforce these fines. So a public citizen cannot go and make a citizen's arrest for someone who is violating a public health order. If someone was committing a criminal act of sorts, there are occasions when a member of the public can file a private information, as it's called, but that's not approved by the Crown very often. At the end of the day, the difference between this type of order and any law in the criminal code is basically the sanctions. I mean, a criminal code offense, if it's an indictable offense, you're looking at an imprisonment of, let's say, over 6 months, or a summary conviction offense is under 6 months and a substantial fine. But here, it's not that. The penalties are not as significant as a criminal code offense, but still, I mean, I think there is a fine involved, and a fine is punitive. And I believe for repeat offenders, there would be further consequences as well.
So people who consistently refuse to wear a mask can still get cited for it.
Yes.
That kind of thing. How much of that have you seen in your practice? Has there been much of that?
No, I don't practice in criminal law, but just in the law practice itself, there really hasn't been much involvement of lawyers in this. I think there are bylaw officers or police officers that are enforcing it, and it's not going through the court system per se. There may be an issue with people renewing their driver's license if they have outstanding fines, and other repercussions for them if they don't pay them.
And Lisa, I'll get back to you in a second here. People are crying human rights here, though. Charlotte, they're saying it's my civil liberty that I can wear a mask or not. So we have a human rights tribunal. Where does that fit into all of this?
It's all about a balance, really, Bruce. I mean, the balance between the public interest, safety interests, and that's what the mask mandate is there for, and the face covering requirement is for, and your own personal rights. I mean, Section 7 of the Charter, which is the one that entrenches all the rights that we have to security, et cetera, rights to privacy. It doesn't go so far as to not allow the government to put forward a public health measure. So there are limits to everyone's rights in the Charter of Rights.
Okay, Lisa Houle at WorkSafe, let's go back to you. The regulations and the guidelines are put in place by the provincial government through Ministry of Health, health authorities, Solicitor General. The enforcement, though, falls to workplaces. That's where employees have to enforce what's being put in place. So employers have to make sure that their employees are up to speed on what's going on. And WorkSafe helps them better understand how to do that, correct?
Yes, although I guess it depends what you mean by enforcement in this case. Further to what Charlotte was saying, this is a ministerial order. It's not a WorkSafeBC order. And my understanding is that the enforcement of it, in terms of issuing fines and responding to situations of noncompliance, would fall to bylaw officers and the police. Our officers were not dispatched to enforce that order. But when it comes to, the practicality of who are the people talking about what the rules are on a particular site, if that's what you mean, then often that does fall to the employer and the workers who are that front line as the clientele and patrons are arriving, and they do have to express and communicate what the requirements are on that site.
So,
Yeah.
no, sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of what we would expect there is that, really COVID aside even, but, COVID is bringing this to light, there is a requirement under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, general duties provision for employers to keep workers safe, and that there's policy in there around bullying and harassment, as well section part 4 of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulation outlines specifics around protecting workers from violence from the non-workers that they might encounter.
Yeah, which is what I want to talk about next when these situations of confrontation pop up. We're talking on Chamber Chats today with Charlotte Solomon, who is a partner at the law firm of McConnon, Beyond, O'Connor and Peterson, and Lisa Houle is the WorkSafeBC Manager of Occupational Health and Safety and Consultation and Education Services. So, I have seen confrontations in workplaces and in places of business, restaurants, grocery stores. As we moved through this, Lisa, were there updates given to employers as to how they should manage things as they come along? And when they did start to see incidences of disrespect or potential violence, what's being done about that?
Well, I guess if I can give a little bit of background for where we started out on this, the guidance that we've primarily given is with respect to the requirement for a workplace health and a COVID health and safety plan. The way that we've had employers work through their plan is starting from a risk assessment and understanding the COVID risks that apply to them, and certainly making sure that they're aware, first and foremost, of any of the public health orders that apply. So in doing these risk assessments, part of that would be, and when we've been doing our consultation or our inspections, we've been speaking to employers about that as well, is how are you keeping people safe? I think that over the course of the year, every time the orders were updated, there was additional confusion and people interpreted them differently. And sadly, I think that, as much as it's such a great story that restrictions are being lifted, the coming months might see further confusion because people are understanding the lifting of restrictions differently as well. And people are at different levels of comfort, really. So, it's really important that employers notice that there's a risk there. That's step number one. And that we have been giving them some advice about where they can get some help and resources for controlling those risks, potentially eliminating it if they can. That's the first step. And then controlling it in whichever way makes the most sense for their site. But in terms of updates, really it's tied to the orders as they come out. And we've been doing as much as we can to answer questions for employers as they come up.
We've been giving some advice to our clients on this as well. Every workplace, whether a law office, accounting office, subject to people coming in, it's a good idea to install a panic button at the front. So if someone is confronted by someone who is harassing a customer that is harassing the staff or being belligerent and not not being very nice. There is support for that person. They can hit the panic button, and then people that we've had bills in our office that when a panic button is hit, everyone comes to the front to help deal with
Hmm.
the situation. Also, signage. It's very important for businesses to put signage on their door about how you are expected to wear a mask here, and there'll be no tolerance for any harassment of our staff. Um, just to educate the customers as well about what the business is willing to put up with and what the guidelines are.
I've,
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Charlotte. Back to the enforcement piece. It's not the intention, the onus does not technically fall on the employer to enforce the mask piece, but we would be expecting signage and clear communication of policy so that that's obvious for people.
which we should be getting used to by now, one would think
Yeah,
anyway.
you think.
I've also seen panic buttons installed that will go either directly to a security company or, in extreme cases, to the police if response is needed. Charlotte, when does that sort of stuff become a crime? When does that confrontation go from disrespectful to being a criminal act?
Anytime someone feels that um, that they're threatened, that their physical safety is threatened or their emotional safety, and then it becomes a crime, and then it becomes a police matter. But no worker or anyone should be having to put up with people that are belligerent, rude, etc. We just don't want the employees to take it on their own. There needs to be a plan of action as to what you will do if someone comes into your workplace, a customer without a mask, when asked to put it on, if they and shown the policy, they are belligerent about it. Every workplace needs that plan of action, and WorkSafeBC can give those guidelines.
I'm going to read from the actual indicator from the province as to when you cannot wear a mask or when you're not allowed to wear a mask. They include physical, cognitive, or mental impairments. People cannot remove a mask on their own. Children under the age of 12. People who need to remove their mask to communicate due to a hearing impairment rather. Obviously, if you're under 12, that's obvious, but there is no proof required to make claim number one, number two, or number four. You kind of take people at their word. Charlotte, why is that? Why do people not have to prove that? Is that a civil liberties thing, or what's the deal on that?
I think they're not looking to the person who is trying to enforce the mask rule in the public place to be the bylaw officer, the police officer. If there is a doubt, if there's an issue, then they're expected to call someone. We cannot put that burden on our employees. It's just not fair to do that. Um, as far as proof, I mean, what proof is there? I mean, someone saying that they have a psychological condition that they can't wear a mask. There really isn't any proof that could be universal and authentic for everyone. It's very hard to come up with something like that. Hey, we're having problems coming up with a travel passport here, so
Yeah.
it's even more invasive and even more subjective.
There's other things that people will say, like, I find it uncomfortable. I don't feel sick, so why is this such a big deal? I'm not going to wear one, so you're losing my business if you don't let me in. I don't like hand sanitizer. It dries out my skin. Or if in a restaurant, people say, well, these are my work friends. I see them all the time. It's not unsafe. Or I'm already vaccinated, so I don't need to wear a mask or wash my hands. Again, that's when people in the workforce, Lisa, and the stories that we've heard from our members of the chamber, a lot of the people that are being confronted are young people. They might be working part-time. They are entry-level workers. Their kids working part-time. That's not good.
No, it's not good. And, we really want to see that workplaces have functioning violence prevention programs and bullying and harassment policies and procedures. And there's lots of fancy words, and we can point to the rules and the regulations around what that looks like, but it's basically having a plan of action, as Charlotte said, that would include assessing the risk, trying to get rid of the risk if you can, if not control it. So the idea of a panic button is what we would call a control. We don't mandate specifically what needs to happen, but we do make sure that, and we want to see the employers thinking through this process about what are the things that they can be doing. And then they need to communicate and train each and every one of their workers to what their expectations are and what supports are available for them. So every work site is different, so it's very hard for us to have blanket statements about exactly what should happen. but we have a lot of guidance about the steps you should go through. And I am happy to see that there are a number of resources out there, even outside of WorkSafe. Some of the partners that we work with in the tourism hospitality industry have scripts for difficult clients and have scenarios to work through through some training that has recently been released. So the help is out there. I just encourage employers to see their responsibility in that and reach out and work through with their employees and their workers to make sure everybody feels safe.
Other goings on that kind of made this all feel so much more stressful when we saw these hordes of people gathered on beaches at Kitsilano Beach and places like that in Vancouver. I want to talk about that stuff next. We're talking today on Chamber Chats with Lisa Houle, who is with WorkSafeBC. She is the Manager of Occupational Health and Safety Consultation and Education Services, and Charlotte Solomon is a partner at the law firm of McConnon, Beyond, O'Connor, and Peterson. So we saw all those people, Charlotte, on the beach, doing their thing, not wearing masks, throwing frisbees. Some of them would have been given citations and fines. Are they being paid? Do you know?
Are they being paid?
Yeah, are people actually following through and paying when they've been levied a fine?
I'm not aware of that information, but it does concern me a lot when you see people like that, because a lot of the young people have only had one vaccine, if any. If they're over 12, hopefully they had one vaccine. They haven't had two. We have the Delta variant now that apparently people are still susceptible to if they've only had one vaccination. And it's quite alarming. The other thing that's alarming is when police officers attempt to enforce the laws are basically targeted by the crowd. We've been seeing some of that lately in Vancouver, and that's also very disturbing because these measures are out there to protect the public, and people need to take their own responsibilities in seeing that the public are protected and they're not part of the problem. And once they become part of the problem, then I would hope that law enforcement is able to correct their behavior and point out to them that, look, you really shouldn't be engaging in this type of behavior. You should wear a mask. You should social distance. You shouldn't be congregating in groups. It's part of our civic duty.
Young and fearless, a lot of them, right? As we move into the next phase, which we hope will be happening on the schedule that's being put in place, there will have to be some adjustments to everything. The way we're at right now, those small in-person meetings are now allowed, and gatherings of up to 50 people, indoors or outdoors, are allowed with safety plans in place. Lisa, what does that mean with safety plans in place? Where do we find those guidelines?
On our website. So that is reference to the safety plan requirement that has been in place since end of May last year. So most industries that have been working would have been, well aware of the safety plan template and support that we provide. We provided protocols as well and a lot of guidance to help employers create their safety plan. Now, I think what you're speaking to right now is that some industries that haven't really been open for a year are suddenly able to open up. And, so they're right now, if we're in step 2, the workplace safety order from public health is still in place. And within that, there's a requirement to have a safety plan. And we have many resources, step-by-step resources on our website that helps outline what exactly we're looking for there. And within that is thinking through risks of violence to your workers and how to really get information from the frontline workers that are there that know what's happening in your workplace and incorporate that into the safety plan.
This is a question for either one of you, and I'm not sure if either of you know the answer, but I was trying to get my head around the liquor laws where they cut off service earlier in the evening and then they suddenly put it back to midnight again. Why is that? Is that because the more you drink, the sloppier you get and you're not going to wear your mask anymore? Or was there more to it than that? I don't really know. Charlotte, do you have any background on that?
I don't have any background on it, but limiting the drinking of alcohol, I think it is all about people congregating. And the longer you allow alcohol to be served in an establishment, whether a restaurant or a lounge or whatever, people are going to congregate longer, and there's going to be more chance of exposure. So they're going to spend more time there, spend more time together, spend more time talking. Talking is a way that this virus is being transmitted. They're learning more and more about it. It's less about contact surfaces. It's more about talking, saliva, breath, that type of thing, as opposed to, touching a counter or a doorknob or something like that. And I think that these liquor laws they're adapting, just like everything needs to adapt as we learn more about this virus. And if we're able to give people more freedoms, that's great. But there still needs to be some control over the fact that, you cannot hang out at a bar till 2 in the morning and dance like you used to in the clubs. Not doing that anymore.
Well, I'm not for a lot of reasons, but I understand what you're saying. When we take a look at things as well in stores, restaurants, I would have to think, by the way, Lisa, that the uptick from the hospitality industry with your organization has been quite intense as they try and follow along with this. With organizations like the BC RFA, the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association, they've probably been pretty active with you guys, right?
Yeah, I think that we have a good relationship with many stakeholders. Those two included Able BC, Go2HR, the Health and Safety Association, um, the Hotel Association. There is many associations in that sector. We've had a lot of conversations. We consulted with them as we created our protocols, and they sent many of their sector plans to us to take a look at as well. So throughout the course of the year, there have been a lot of conversations back and forth.
Either of you have a theory on the future of... Sorry?
I hope that continues.
Yes. Either of you have a theory on the continuing of plexiglass screens in workplaces, whether it's a grocery store checkout or between booths and tables in a restaurant? Any indication on what the future of that looks like? Lisa, has anybody said anything to you about that?
I think that, we have to wait until the specific guidance comes out in step 3. But I will say that even, similar to other controls like masks and distancing and plexiglass in particular, if those do become recommended or optional somewhere down the road, it might be the case that employers make their business decision and decide that they actually like them and decide to keep them. There are many things to consider here. Obviously our lens is worker safety. So there's other things that might benefit not just, the less transmission from COVID, obviously, but other things may come up that make people decide to keep them. Perhaps businesses like them because it's quieter, or people want to frequent business more often. So, I think when you think about the future, there's to what extent is something going to be mandated or not mandated, and then there's the business decisions that individual groups might make.
Yeah, from a point of view in restaurants or cafes, I don't really want the people at the next table hearing my conversation or me hearing them. It's difficult to have a business conversation in that sort of environment. Interesting times ahead, though, when masks no longer become mandatory. Maybe we'll catch up and talk about that in a later version of Chamber Chats. Thank you both for being here. Your insight is invaluable. We very much appreciate it. Charlotte Solomon is a partner at the law firm of McConnon, Beyond, O'Connor and Peterson, also a member of our policy committee at the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. And Lisa Houle is with WorkSafeBC. She is the manager of occupational health and safety consultation and education services. Thank you both again. I'm Bruce Williams, and we'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.
For more episodes of Chamber Chats, go to checknews.ca/podcasts.